Well, my name is Rick. I'm an alcoholic. That's the only thing I can tell you for sure tonight. This is going to be loosely organized. When I said I was going to go first, that just means that I'm do right what I am right now. But Mary suggested that we let things flow and we'll do back and forth. And this is going to be kind of a conversational presentation. We'll see what comes out of it. Uh, I do know this. A lot of this is rehash from the first page of the essay on step 4 in the 12 and 12. That was one of Bill's 10 strikes. It was an absolute drop the mic, watch the ball go out of the ballpark for a home run. It was a big watershed moment to talk about the basic instincts that were the drivers, the demands. And boy, did I make recognition with that. I understood that I started with a desire. And this can be for money, property, prestige, it can be relationships. But with my alcoholic personality, my desires quickly elevated to demands. And if the demand wasn't met, then I'd wind up with full on obsession. And that was kind of the stair steps. We talk about the progression of alcoholism. Well, that was the progression of the emotional drunkenness for me. My desires turned into demands, turned into obsessions. And then my sponsor, he introduced me what he called like a portal, like an entry point. And, it sounded like a science fiction movie, a portal where you can go into the fourth dimension. And I was intrigued. I thought, yeah, I want to go through this portal. And he said, on these 3 basic instincts they used to, in the old days, call them the 3 S's. Gary, I'm sure will remember the 3 S's: security, society, and sex, the drivers for the basic instincts. He said, if you can come up with something that's upsetting to you, that disturbs your serenity, that is not related to a threat, real or imagined, to your instinct for security, society, or sex instinct, then call me immediately, even if it's in the middle of the night. And I knew the old man well enough to never call in the middle of the night, but it never did come up that I could find something that was emotionally disturbing to me, that I was not trusting God on one of those 3 things. So he said the portal was learning to trust God on the 3 S's, and that would give me some emotional balance to start with. How about you, Mary?
Hi. To start, okay. This is going to be kind of fun. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about, but I was, I had to reprint this because I'd put it away someplace. So, I can't find it. I kind of was thinking about how for me, it's whether or not I can accept the things I cannot change. Emotional sobriety for me. I didn't know, I didn't understand powerlessness other than alcohol. And then I understood it that way. But when I got in the program and I started to learn about the steps and so forth, and then try to apply them in my life, I agree with the basic instinct type thing. I was thinking that I would be satisfied if I got something outside of me. That it was like I just needed him and then I'd be okay, or that job and I'd be okay, or that dress or that car or something like that. And early on for me, I had the great gift of listening to Chuck Chamberlain, who said a couple of things that really started to make me look at this from a different angle. So emotional sobriety, he said, why is it that everything grows from the inside out? It's only the human being trying to get something outside of them to put into them or to get for them to make them feel better. And that created perhaps a little crack in the acorn cap where I said, what does that mean? And I started to realize that my whole focus, my whole drive was about satisfying me, the alcoholic opera. And it was something that over time, a long time really, that I finally began to see how these dependencies were on others. So when I finally got hurt enough by not having my needs met, um, I was thinking about this, how I, instead of just going to God, because I wasn't raised with a God. And a lot of you people have heard my talk, and usually it took me 20 years before I realized that I was intellectually creating things. And that what I was doing is I was relying on my self-sufficiency for my power. And I didn't understand that 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 I was going to be transformed, or transcended into a new realm of anything. I didn't understand this at all. I really didn't. And I think I've said it before. When I was new, I heard this woman say one time, she said, I'm going to be happy with him or without him. And I thought, what's the matter with her? How are you going to be happy without a him? I didn't understand this total emotional sobriety at all. So for me, this has been a journey, as it says on page 55, of going in to find out what it is that is triggering me to react versus respond. And emotional sobriety for me has been still, and today I look at it as kind of an adventure to see what it is that's going to trigger me to get all bent out of shape, because that's the area that I'm still agnostic in. In other words, I'm just living independent from God. Before this started, I just decided I'd look up the word humility. I don't know why. I just thought you don't open a dictionary anymore. You open Google or something. And, and I asked, and it had a funny definition, but then I saw down below, it said the Bible or the biblical definition of humility. And it was where your dependence is totally on God. And I thought, wow, that's the whole program here, is that we're right from the second step. When I finally can admit I can't figure this out, it's like God's going, good, because I have an answer for you, but I have to surrender. And the ego and the depth of my ego and wanting what I want when I want it. Unfortunately, I usually got what I wanted and had to pay the consequence. But as life goes on and the journey goes on, I have let up on having to have the answer. So I don't know where I want to go tonight with this. I think I want to talk about this, the awareness of where I am today with it. I can go through the journey, but today I've been going through a gift, a time over the last, I don't know, since this thing was going, and then we have another thing we're doing on Tuesday nights, that book. I was given something when I was new in sobriety, and I was in North Hollywood, Radford, and there was a dude in there that had been sober for a while, and he was into something called Gurdjieff, and he had this group, and he asked me to attend it. And I was in that group for over 2.5 years. And it was probably the foundation of me understanding that there was a presence deep down inside of me, and that I could detach from all my little wants and needs, and there would be a presence that would be present with me. And of late, that work and things that I did 40 something years ago is coming to fruition. And so I heard you, Sarah, say that we can talk about where we are today with this. And and what's actually going on. Early on in my recovery, I've always been seeking, because I was just so lonely. I had nothing inside of me, but, and yet I knew there was something that was going on. I had a spiritual experience, or really a miracle happen with my daughter about 2 years before I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. And because of that miracle that I saw a healing with her, I knew that there was a God. But I never felt as though that God really had anything to do with me, because I was so rotten inside with what alcoholism did with me, and I did with it. And so coming into this program, and where you hear this God is all loving and all omnipotent, I just didn't think that was for me. I thought maybe it worked for you, but it didn't work for me. And so I always felt as though I had to, that God was busy with you people, or the war or something. And so that I didn't count. And so that's a process of getting rid of false pride. And I think that isn't talked about a lot, but it is in the 12 and 12. It says pride cometh before the fall. But I don't hear it a lot talked about. And as I've grown in this program and had years of recovery, I've realized that there were times when I rested on my laurels. And gal I sponsor, or Juanita, talks about a laurel is like a laurel wreath. You get an award for something you had done, a race or something. And so I would be resting on my great accomplishments in AA, and today, and yet it was telling me I had a daily reprieve. And so as the years have gone on, the biggest gift I've gotten is that I can now live a day at a time, and I can show up, pay attention, tell the truth, and not be attached to the outcome. I watch to see the areas of my life that I get a reaction from, because that's usually where I'm asleep and I'm not allowing God in. And it doesn't mean I have to do this perfectly. Thank God I'm a seasoned beginner. Thank God there's a step 10 that says when wrong, promptly admit it. I'm wrong a lot, but I'm not afraid anymore, because I'm in the world of the spirit with that 10th step enough that I'm not afraid to tell you I've been wrong. I didn't ask. I didn't ask God. I didn't ask for help. So that's the shift that's been happening for me. A lot of I ended up in the hospital a week or so ago with a TIA, and I was fascinated. I hadn't had these strange tests, and I didn't. I had to ask Dawn afterwards, because Dawn and Juana were with me. I said, was I really bad in there, or what was happening? She said, no, I was watching you. And I was watching what was happening, because it was like brand new. And the biggest thing I can tell you that I came away from that situation with is that I wasn't frightened. And the only thing I can say, I don't know, maybe that's emotional sobriety or something. I don't know. I wasn't afraid. I felt as though whatever was going to happen I was powerless. I couldn't do anything about it. And yet I was awake to accept whatever the next thing was going to be. Except I kept telling them I had to get out, because I was speaking at some conference the next day, and they let me out. So there you are. So where do I want to go with this dependence? I want to tell you probably my biggest learning on dependence, and how my flaws was for me being a parent. That would be probably what I would start to tell you. The shift came to me when I had about 30 years of recovery. I didn't have a self-made family. Where she loved me lots. She had no reason to love me with what she went through. But what happened is that I continued to bring my relationship with my daughter through the steps. And I continued to pray one prayer, and I continue to do it today. It's on my watch, those pray minder things. God, please make me the mother you want me to be, not the one I think I should be. That I think that's a need for humility to get out of the role of the way I think I should be acting as a parent, but to be the parent that God wants me to be. And I said that prayer much, and I reacted many years with situations that occurred between myself and my daughter. And she lived in another country, um, and there were times when I wouldn't hear from her. There were times when she didn't want to and told me she didn't. Um, and I continued to ask God, what do I need to do? And I realized that I was manipulating. I was trying to get my demand for her to be in my life. And I didn't understand. I'd given her everything except up. And that was really what I needed to do, was to give her up and and wait on the Lord. And I had an experience whereby she was coming to the States to see me, and there had been another whatever. And I was doing another inventory. And I remember I was sitting and I got to my fourth column. And as I put my hand, and I always pray before I do this, I always say, God, please give me divine truth about whatever in that fourth column. And you know what I don't like about myself, whatever they've done doesn't make any difference. What did I do? This is my inventory, not hers. And I remember it was like automatic writing. And I wrote down this thing that said, she has nothing to do with this problem. And I just sat back. I'll never forget it. It was like divine intervention. And I saw myself, and I saw how I was raised, and I saw the abandonment that I had had since I was born, and nursemaids and all this other stuff that goes on. And I realized that when my child was born, it was like a picture that happened for me. My child was born, and she wrapped her arms around me and would say, "I love you, mommy." And that's the first time that I came from a very proper New England, no hugs type thing. And so it was like, that was the first time I had felt something. And that triggered me, for some reason, being totally dependent on her liking me in order for me to be okay. And that was the crutch of my dependence. And I saw what I did and how I would act if she wasn't talking to me or whatever. And in that point, I remember I sat up and I looked at that line of what I did, and how she must be so burdened. She had to take care of her mother, for God's sakes, before she could take care of herself. And I saw it for what it was. It was like I had a wake up call. It was just as clear as I could ever imagine. And in that moment, I stood and I remember I said, God, I never want to hurt her again. I just never want to hurt her again. And my whole program changed, where I was able to listen. I was able to meet her where she was. I was able to be actually planned emptiness whenever she comes. I saw things like, I'll be honest with you, if the phone rings right now and it's her, I will excuse myself and I will answer that phone. And the reason I do that is because everybody came before her. And so I found there was, I did that in the middle of a meeting one day. And I said, sorry, my daughter, I'll just let her know I'm on, but I have to answer this, because I wasn't emotionally there for her when she was a child. Today, I'm able to be that. Today, I don't have to get involved with her life, but maybe I can be there to support her, and I never know how. So my prayer goes out. God, make me the mother you want me to be, not the one I think I should be. And then I just sit back and I watch. And it's almost like I can feel the presence come in and say, well, you could say this or not. And if something's going on and I feel as though I'm getting too involved with what I think she should be doing, I sit back and I go, hey, and Mother Mary, I always call her Mother Mary. I don't know why. Mother Mary, I think you should be parenting her, not me. I think I'll wait. And something shifts. It works every time for me. So that's where I am today with my stuff that I'm still working with. Um, I don't think I'm finished. I think I love this where it says what areas of my life. We look at every area of my life to find out if I'm practicing a spiritual principle in it. And that's how I do my inventories today. A lot of you people know that. So I find out what my principle is and what principle I'm going against with anything that has made me feel as though I'm reacting versus responding. Rick, there you go. It's your turn.
Thank you, Mary. One of the things I prize about our friendship is that Mary is demonstrating for me the ability to meet anyone where they're at. That's the nicest thing whenever you don't have to be somewhere other than where you're at for someone to care about you or to share with you, that it takes away those masks that's on like a tongue depressor that's got a mask you hold up in front of your face that you show. It's the face you show other people. It makes it sincere. And that's one of the things I'm learning is to let people be exactly where they're at and meet them there. And I can fellowship and have interaction with people for who they are and where they're at. Because when I came, I was very disintegrated. I'm a words guy. I love words. uh, I heard y'all mentioning our mutual friend Bill. Uh, I see some of this Friday morning crew here. Uh, a fellow wordsmith. I love words, but words in themselves aren't anything. It's the feeling that it's trying to describe. And a lot of my feelings that I have today, words are not adequate. I can tell you that I do feel belonging. I can tell you I do feel safe. And I like this concept of if there's something disturbing to me, what am I agnostic with? What am I not trusting God? Because if I'm trusting God, I'm in the sweet spot. I'm safe and protected, unaffected. I get that promise about just to the extent that we trust the unlimited God, do we, instead of the limited self, do I feel safe and protected? And that to me is the best in emotional sobriety I've ever had glimpses of. And God knows I can't live there for long, but it's nice to visit. uh, Whenever I was disintegrated, the worst, I'm a product of lots and lots of counseling. They could never counsel me sober, but I got a lot of good things from counseling. They kept me together till I could find AA and get sober. But I was in Texas, right near Prosper, Texas. As a matter of fact, I was in the Collin County Mental Health Clinic system, and this is like 1976, and they were trying to figure out if I was nuts or not. And the truth of the matter is, I was alcoholic. But I told this counselor, I felt safe, so I just told this counselor, there's a lot of time I feel like I'm on a cloud with God, and my body is down on the three-dimensional earth, and there's kind of a funnel that grows out of the back of my head to the clouds, and I look over at God and say, oh, look at him now. You know, he's about to make a huge mistake. Don't do it. And I was trying to describe being the watcher instead of the doer, this disassociative state. And God bless this lady that was my counselor. She did the yes. Oh, I see our time is up. When I came back next week, the receptionist said, you'll be meeting with Ed this week. You have a new counselor. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And whenever I sat down, Ed goes right for it. Tell me about this funnel in the back of your head and being on the cloud with God. And he thought like maybe I was son of Sam or hearing some voices, or he wanted to make sure that I hadn't, didn't have a hit list or something. And so That was 75, 76. And I wandered along with that. I had this innate feeling that I was not God, but I could be with God. And God and I could observe this doer that was running amok. And that was 76. I didn't get sober till 87. So we had 9 more years of that the counselors thought maybe I was psychotic, but I wasn't. It was actually a form of spirituality. There was the supreme being, creator, whatever you'd like, was schooling me even then that there's something more to my life, that I have a soul that can be an observer, not just the doer. And the closest I could come to that was whenever I'd be in trouble or get caught or whatever, when things, the friction of life got intense. Let's just say it that way. I always felt like there was a good person inside. I clung to that. Even though my behavior was awful, I would always go to, there's a good person inside. I know today that that good person concept I was clinging to was my soul. That this physical body is just a spacesuit that holds, it's not the astronaut. And I'm okay with having that division, to being separated, but a part of. The best way I've tried to describe it is like the little boy that had no money in his pocket, but he's got his nose stuck up against the window at the candy store, just obsessed with something he couldn't have. That's the way I live my drunken life, just obsessed with something I couldn't have or have enough of. And not only was that alcohol, but it was also about money, prestige, social standing, all of the instincts. So when I was mashed against the glass, all my other vision went away. I couldn't see anything else. And today I can take a step back and try to know that I believe, this is just my belief, and it's what I've been working on. My life is kind of like a prism. Okay, that little 3-sided prism uh, that I saw, I got to know in 7th grade at science class. But if you hold the prism up to the light, it will refract the colors of the rainbow. And I was astounded by that. And through this path, through recovery, part of what I've gotten a glimpse of emotional sobriety is to take on the persona of the prism and clean up enough to where the sunlight can pass through me and try to be, light the path of someone else or be a blessing for them. And that way I am not the doer anymore. It gives me kind of a neutral role, and neutral is good for me. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead is not good for me. That's the personality. And that was the driver that drove me to the alcoholic pit. But the neutrality is, if I will clean myself up and hold myself daily to the sunlight of the Spirit, God will pass through me and reflect rainbow colors for people. And occasionally I'll have someone say, oh, wow, that was just beautiful. Or what you said. I really like that thing about the pot holding the sponsee while God applies the heat, or whatever. That, in its proper circumstance, if I'm the prism and have humility, like Mary Thayer was talking about, the humility is to say, I'm glad you were blessed by some experience that I was able to share. But I can tell you this, I am not the rainbow. And furthermore, I am not the light. My job is just to clean up enough to where I can hold my life up to the sunlight of the Spirit, let it pass through me. And then if someone else can be benefited by it, then that's a great thing. And that's as close to altruistic as I've been able to come. And that's not very consistent, but to try to be a light for someone else's path and to learn that humility. And I've had it come in strong, strong doses. I've got a huge sense of pridefulness. Those that know me know that I untreated, unchecked, I'm really obnoxious on pride, intellectual pride, whatever, big book pride. I mean, pride's so sneaky, it can come in from all different directions in my life. But we have to learn from the teachers that come before us, right in front of us. And I was at a meeting in Southwest City, Missouri, called the Cornerstone Group. And here were a lot of my AA heroes there. And I mean, these were people, one of which had traveled the world teaching the big book on weekend seminars. And some of his other big book men and women. And I'm just soaking up all of this wisdom. I'm trying to be a parasite. I'm coattailing on their sobriety. I don't have my own, but I'm listening to theirs and hoping someday it will come to me. Because they said things like you can get sober with your eyes as well. Observe what you're is being demonstrated for you. They were great demonstrators. So I'm listening to all this, and over in the corner, here's Junior, and Junior's got bib overhauls on. I said that wrong on purpose. Overhauls. He's got his bib overhauls, and he has his car keys out, and he's digging his ear for earwax with his car keys. I lose track of the entire meeting and all my heroes and what they're saying. And I obsess on Junior with the car keys and the earwax. And then to top it all off, the grand finale, he held the key up, wiped it with his fingers, and then wiped that off on his overhauls. And I was just aghast. And I had completely lost at least 10 minutes of good stuff from the meeting, obsessing on Junior. And then they had the gall to call on him at this big hitters discussion meeting. And Junior says, well, there's been a lot of great things said here today, and God knows I ain't no beacon of light. And under my breath, I'm saying, no kidding. You know, what's this rube got to say in this room full of wisdom? And then he followed up and said, although I ain't no beacon of light, I pray every day that I not be a stumbling block in someone else's path. And I felt about this tall. I had judged him so harshly over the keys and the earwax and what appeared to be a simpleton to be so profound and let me know that you don't have to be good with words. You have to be pure of heart. And he showed that to me. And I ask God every day that I not forget that demonstration. It doesn't have to come from water walkers. It can come with people with mud on their tennis shoes or earwax on their overhauls. It's always there. It's always available. My job is to be awake and aware to it and be a seeker. And that has been one of the greatest joys of sobriety too, to seek out. And I have had a lot of emotional sobriety tips, if you will, come to me by being a seeker. And I grew up in Oklahoma, and they have wheat fields there. And whenever the wheat is fully mature, it's all about head high right before they harvest it. But when you look at a wheat field, there are some wheat heads that are waving up above the others. Maybe they got a little bit extra nutrition, maybe a little extra sunlight of the spirit, what have you. But they're waving up there, and everybody else is head high. So I've taken it on myself since I got sober, and this I was still in that living at the group living, not ready for prime time living house. That this quest started to go through the wheat fields of AA and find those wheat heads and look at them and say, sir, ma'am, if you don't mind, would you spend some time with me? Could you tell me some of the things you see from there? can you help me find my way? I get a lot of collateral support from all the other ones that are head high, but you seem to have a vision that I do not. And invariably, if they sensed that I was sincere, they would smile. And it was just like that little kid being bounced on the knee and head scruffed and everything. Sure, kid, let's talk. And they would share with me their secrets, their recipes for how that they were enjoying life and how they let the love of God come into their lives and spread that. Sometimes it was quickly, sometimes it was slowly. Some of these encounters were very brief and some of them were deferred for later. Mary Thayer and I were on the program together for roughly, was it 16 years or something, that elapsed before we actually made true contact, but everything in its right time. But when I'd leave these wheatheads, they would say, okay, kid, enjoy the journey. You keep being a seeker, and there will be people that will be happy to share their spirituality with you if you're sincere and you're asking. And I would thank them. And as I would walk away, they would say, oh, by the way, kid, if you can see me, you're going to be one too. And that was such a hope statement that it's available to everyone, even someone like me. I'm no greater or lesser than anyone else, but I don't have to idolize heroes. I can utilize them and let them teach me and become teachable. Because when I got here, my attitude was what I don't know doesn't matter. I was that guy. Whew. Talk about spankings. I took a bunch of them over that attitude. One of my great teachers, one of those wheatheads, he was a full-blood Choctaw Indian in Oklahoma, and he had a real different worldview. And he said, Rick, this thing about tooting your own horn, he who exalteth himself is later debased. And we all know debase is the bottom. I said, that sounds like a strange scripture. He said, yeah, it's been secularized, but you get what I'm saying is, if you toot your own horn, then you'll be debased and you'll have more grief. And I had a confused look on my face. And he said, okay, let me make it personal to you. Rick Ferris, you greatly overestimate your market share of who wants to hear what you have to say. I was like, oh, dagger to the heart. Talk about a pride hit. But this man loved me enough to try to deflate that pride enough to where I could get some kind of emotional sobriety, some connection with God through the humility. And he said, your ego, when it's deflated, you're at your best. But the problem with you, Rick, is your ego seems to have fix-a-flat. It reinflates. So I have to be on guard about this reinflating fix-a-flat ego that will set me apart from instead of being a part of. And that was a big thing in trying to be emotionally sober too, is set aside the false pride and snobbery about those that don't get it and be a part of instead of apart from. Because God knows y'all tolerated me for a long time whenever I thought I knew, but I didn't. And not knowing today is one of the greatest things that I enjoy daily about sobriety because it's a new adventure and I don't have to know. And the world is going to spin on its axis, whether I know or not. We had this guy in my crew that we used to run with. We called him Bullwinkle, like Rocky and Bullwinkle, the cartoon. Thank you, Mr. Know-It-All. And I do not want to be Bullwinkle anymore. There's so much that is open to me for emotional sobriety and for the grace of God to enter by saying, I don't know. That's one of the hardest things for me to say is I can't afford it. I don't know. And I need help. So I try to stay focused. That's part of my prayer life, is to deflate that pride on a daily basis where it's not so hard to say, I don't know. I can't afford it. That can be financially, emotionally, whatever. I can't afford it. Or I need help. And those three things give me an opportunity to ask God for help on those three things. And lastly, the three types that my Choctaw friend told me that have the hardest time getting and staying sober are the ones that come in that are too pretty, too smart, too much money. And then he looks at me and he says, so with that being said, I think you got a pretty good shot, Rick, because you're not too pretty, too smart, and have no money. And I had that hurt look. And he said, look, those are all sources of pride. The biggest thing that stands in the way of your contact with God and your spirituality is pride and ego. So be aware of those things. Ask God for your help, God's knowledge of his will and the power to carry that out. And I ask every day, what is my goal? What's the target I'm shooting for? And I would like to have protection, care, and direction from God. I ask for those three things: protection, care, and direction. And then the power to follow up on that once it's revealed to me, knowing full well that I'm liable to have paid for that with a lot of absurd actions unless I talk to some of my fellow travelers about, I think this is what God's message was for me, but what do you think? And if I'll follow the dictates of that higher power, then I'll get in that position of neutrality, safe and protected. And I'll feel like that all is right with the world. I want to give it back to Mary.
Hey there. Thanks, Rick. Yeah, I was just thinking about how emotional sobriety, I think, can only be attained by the reworking of the 12 steps. That's my experience with it. It wasn't until Missy and I were asked, or I was asked to do this 12-step retreat stuff about 25 years ago. And I said, come on, you do it with me. I don't know what to do. And so we've been doing this big book, 12-step retreat. What happened with that is that as we did it a couple of times a year, I was living in she was in Massachusetts, I was in Maine, and we basically did it there. And each year to take one thing through that I was agnostic in other words, that I was living independent from God. So over this 25 years, we were able to distinguish a way of working one area of our life. I was so grateful to have Missy with me because she was married and she always was bringing her husband through it. And then finally she decided to bring the principle of marriage through it and instead of the person. And we got down to some real in-depth things that she was laying on her husband that really came from how she had perceived her parents. And it was profound. It was just absolutely profound. And I would bring through things like my mother's cat that attacked my cat. And, I thought that was kind of a little silly inventory I had done one year. And it actually showed how I treated anybody that went against the way I looked at things, how I treated it, that had a different thought other than mine. And was a wonderful lesson for me to do. And so the two of us, as we grew together, over year after year of doing steps, doing the 12 steps, there was this awakening that started within me instead of from my head. And I think that's so important to share about emotional sobriety. My journey is not from my head to my heart. My journey is from my heart to my head. I have intellectual knowledge completely and had it at 20 years in recovery, and knew every line and everything else. And yet I still felt disconnected from God, from you, and from my fellows and myself. I just didn't feel good. And it wasn't until I really got a hold of, what have I come to believe in? Not what did I believe when I was a little girl? That's not what that says. But what have I come to believe in as a power greater than myself? And as a lot of you know, I was rereading the book and was pondering Bill looking at God as a newfound friend. And it was at that moment I had a series of just sitting there with that feeling and realizing that I don't think I thought of God as a friend. And I compared it to Missy. Missy and I have been friends since we were 6. And, I've sponsored the last almost 43 years. There isn't too much that she and I don't know about each other. And I realized that I wasn't afraid to tell her anything I was up to, but I was really kind of afraid to tell God. And so I had to look at my conception of God. And that, I think, is a pivotal place for the oldsters, if you will. What is your conception today of that presence? And mine continues to grow to be friendlier and more. And I will say this: having a friend, we have to tell each other some things that sometimes you don't like to tell each other. And but the one gift that I've had with Missy and I, for some reason, I think just were committed. Maybe we were soul sisters or something, and we landed here. But we've gone through unbelievable things in over 40 something years. And we've still continued not to drink, not to use, and not to kill ourselves. And on the other side of the pain that we've gone through, we had a better connection with that presence of God. And my sponsor would tell me that. My original sponsor would say, don't drink, don't use, and don't kill yourself. And on the other side of your pain, you will be closer to that God that's ever present. And I found her to have told me the truth about that. So what does that mean? That means that I started to look, and one of the gals that I sponsor talks about realizing that they want to figure it out so that they don't have to have pain. And yet, if I'm not willing to go through some necessary suffering, I'm never going to get connected to that presence. And that, I think, when we're talking about pride and ego, we need to go through necessary suffering. I personally feel it when I do a 6th and 7th step. Because that 6th step is asking me, am I ready for God? Or am I ready to know what I need to do in self-sufficiency, try to figure it out and do it? And after a while, unfortunately, fear will come in and motivate me to go back to doing the defects in my character and going against my principles. So when the 7th step prayer says at the very end, God grant me strength to go out from here to do your bidding, it doesn't say grant me strength so that I can go back to doing what I want. It doesn't say that. It says that I now have a set of principles and values that I realized I've been going against if I've done a thorough fourth and fifth step. I know where I haven't been honest. I knew where I wasn't, kind. I knew where I didn't have any open mind. I knew where I was people pleasing. In other words, if you're a people pleaser, that means you're dishonest, a phony, and a liar. And I realized those were principles that I did not want to be, my principle was to be authentic. You know how much strength you need from God to be authentic? Oh my goodness. You see, that's what that emotional sobriety was telling me. As long as I'm other dependent, in other words, dependent on what you think of me instead of what God thinks of me, I'm not going to grow up. I'm not going to have a spiritual principle in my life if I'm people pleasing. So this takes a lot of willingness to walk through and sit with kind of the horrors that you see that you've done in order to get your way. So when we do our retreats, Missy and I, we get to the sixth and seventh step, and I use a couple of things. And I think I'm just going to share them because I think it's necessary to hear that just doesn't happen without you going through something, okay? There's one, I'm going to paraphrase these things. There's one that's called the refiner's touch. And I read it because I didn't understand. My sponsor's husband used to say that he was refined in the furnace of his afflictions. And I would say, what the hell does that mean? He had gone home. He was all, I don't know, upset about something. And he was sure something bad was going to happen. He got in his apartment and he would tell the story. He'd say, he got in my apartment and I looked on the coffee table and he used to call it the other big book, which is the Bible, because he was a Baptist or something, and he knew that Bible. And he said, I looked down and the phrase was, now I know where it came from, but I didn't know what he was talking about when he'd be telling this. He was probably talking about the sixth and seventh step too. And he would say, it said, I've refined you in the furnace of your afflictions. And I would go, God, what does it mean? Never asked him. I don't know why I never asked him. And then, years after he died, these computers came. I got an email and it was called The Refiner's Touch. And it was a story about these women in a Bible study that were reading the book of Malachi. See, now I know what book it came out of. And I think it was verse 3, line 3 or so, I don't know. Anyway, and it goes on and it says that God will refine you like silver or something, be refined. So these ladies didn't know what it meant either. And so one lady said, I'm going to go see a silversmith and see how silver is refined. And so she went and he put the silver in this big oven and it heated up and it took it out and it was silver. And she said, she was looking at him doing that. And she said, how do you know? How do you know when to take the silver out? He said, well, I have to watch it at all times. I have to constantly watch the silver and it's in the furnace. And I have to, and finally when it's just a bit, if I don't take it out right at the right time, then it'll just melt down into the furnace, I guess. And so she says, well, how do you know? How do you know when to take it out? And he smiled and he said, oh, that's easy. He said, when I see my reflection in the metal or in the silver. So you see, if you're in a hot spot and you're having a difficult time, it's because God has you in the furnace in your sixth and seventh step and is burning away that pride and burning away those things that have kept you from the sunlight of the Spirit. So that's the first thing that I understood on that one. And then Richard Rohr wrote a book called Falling Upward. And in that, he quotes Necessary Suffering. And he says, how true do you want to be? If you want to be really truthful, you're going to go through some necessary suffering, because you have to get rid of the false masks that Rick was talking about. And, you know, when you start to take off one mask and you don't show up with that people-pleasing mask, you know, that is painful. And there will be some suffering. And your ego will be fighting with you. And it talks about it in our 12 and 12. It says, when character building is lost in the dust and we seek after comfort for the moment. And that's in your 7th step in the 12 and 12. And that line means that, you know, you'll come into a situation and you'll start to people please. And if you do that, everybody will be comfortable. But by God, when you go home, the pain of you saying yes when you meant no, and just saying it just so that you like me thing is going to kill you after a while. And nobody's doing it to you except your own self. So this process of going inward and finding the areas of where I fear. Remember, fear is an evil corroding thread that shot through the fabric of my existence. It's evil. That means it's a lower power. I'm totally familiar with that evil corroding thread. Today, my emotional sobriety is contingent on either a reaction or a response. My reaction is always being motivated by fear. Always being motivated by fear. Not faith. If I'm not in a place of neutrality, then I'm coming from fear. That, I think, is where I want to stop.
Rick, do you want to say anything else? No? So, oh my goodness, you guys, that was phenomenal. Wow. Thank you. I'm going to type my email address into the chat. If anybody wants the list of recordings, just email me and I'll send you our Dropbox of recordings. So I guess what I'll do is I'll open up the meeting now. Is there anybody that would like to share or have any questions for Mary and Rick? So what happens if you don't volunteer, I start to choose people against your will. All right. Oh, thank you, Giselle.
Hi, I'm an alcoholic. My name is Giselle, and thank you, Mary and Rick, from my hometown state of Florida. I grew up and was raised there, and I moved to Las Vegas, Nevada 9 months ago. So the fact that you're in Florida really touches my heart, because I was there for a long time and retired here in Vegas. You know, what you said, Mary, I mean, both of you made such great sense and were really helpful. Thank you. And Mary, in particular for me, I have one and only one son, one child. And I know that, you know, yeah, my emotional sobriety depended on how much he liked me. And when he didn't, or when he disapproved, or when he didn't talk to me in a way that I felt was loving, my whole day and next day would be ruined until I spoke to him again, you know. And thank God, a lot of that, and it is God, you know, because I mean, I have a long history of being around this program, 40 years, but I finally came all in a little over 2 years ago and started my recovery again, but did it, you know, by having a spiritual awakening this time and really working the steps. And I can truly say that when I feel pain today, from anything, any circumstance outside of myself, I immediately turn to God instead of going into self-pity like I used to. And for me, that is life-saving. It is, it allows me to be useful to my sponsees and to those in the program. And that is my purpose today. And I just want to end with saying I love that prayer about God, help me to be the mother you want me to be instead of the mother you think I think I should be. I think that will be really helpful to me, and I will do that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Giselle. All right, let's see. John H., would you like to share from Denver?
Hi, thank you very much. I came in about halfway through, but thank you very much, Rick and Mary. And Rick, I don't know you, but I've been hanging out with you here for a couple of years, and I sure do love you. I heard what you all said, and that that part about the refiner's touch. Like, I get that. And it's funny that I get that from my trade of pie making, but you know what's funny is, like, I put them in the oven, I can go do something and something inside me will ding and I'll know they're done. And I go to the oven and they're perfect, like every time. I never set a timer. And then I have my biggest problem with my business is telling people how to cook the darn pies. It is like, I've written these directions on these boxes 100 ways different, sent people to websites. I mean, we're putting pies with plastic on them in the oven. And like, it's just like mind-boggling to me to let that go. And I understand that refiner's touch. And how do you teach somebody to simply put something in the oven and let it cook until it's done, you know, without opening the oven every time to check, you know, and have that faith, you know, because every time you open the oven, there goes 50 degrees and you just added 15 minutes to your whole process. And that dinged on me. And something this week happened to me, which was really cool, was my nonprofit world has meetings similar to ours, and they're getting very programmy. And I've been not even wanting to attend them. And I didn't know how to explain what was missing from these meetings. And yesterday we had to go for a photo shoot and they wanted to make like a video of us having a fake meeting. And I was just like, no. I was against it like 100%. And so we didn't do that, but there's 5 of us that kind of run the organization, and the other 4 weren't there in the beginning days when I just had these really simple meetings and somebody would bring something to eat and we just start talking until we landed on a topic, and everybody would leave changed. And last night while we were waiting, and they just left us in the hallway, and it was one of the girls' birthdays. So we had this huge sprawl in the hallway, sitting on the floor, eating this beautiful charcuterie, and I made these fun meringues, and we just had like this fairy tale meal in this hallway, and we started talking. And it was like the best meeting I'd been to in forever. And that was the essence of it. And I just never had the words for it. And this morning I was able to write them an email with the words of what I felt about going to those things and how I felt changed last night, you know. And I shared something in that hallway I would have never shared with anybody, but it just came out of my mouth. But I finally had words to it. But yesterday morning, prior to going to that photo shoot. You know, I called up my entire village, you know, all pissed off, looking for somebody to tell me the answer to something just to shut it down. And everybody said, just go. And I was like grumbling about going. And, you know, I was able to get out of the way in that little hallway there, and everything changed. And the program will change from that, which is just awesome. It'll get its essence back again, I hope. But that's all God, you know, and me always just, you know, pushing uphill. And, you know, and it's an imaginary hill. It's not even a real hill. I like make this hill of sand and start pushing my shit up, you know, and I don't have to. I can sit and be patient. And for some reason, what neutrality means, Mary, really made it click for me tonight. I don't know why, but I'm starting to understand more lately in my life what neutrality looks like. And I think that's all I have. Thank you guys all so much for the last couple of years on here and all that. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple months. A lot of it. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Sarah?
Hi, everyone. Sarah, alcoholic. Rick, Mary, just phenomenal. And just what this alcoholic needed to hear from both of you tonight. Just some really good stuff that's going from my heart to my head and my head to my heart, both. You know, Rick, you had said that prayer about pray for protection, care, and direction, and the power to follow up or follow through with that. And I have been, you know, for a long time, there's a little reading that's in a flip calendar that I have that says the prayers that carry the most weight or and of the rarest beauty are those in which we don't demand, but just report for duty. And that's where my prayer life goes every morning. I report for duty every morning. And, I say a group of prayers, and I actually listen to the words as I'm saying them. And try to get on my knees. It's getting a little harder to do that anymore, but still try to get on my knees. And then when I'm done with the prayers, I get up off my knees and I actually salute and say, here I am, God, reporting for duty. Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say, and to whom? And I think I cover all the bases there, you know. So and that prayer, Mary, that you had about God, make me the mother you want me to be, it applies for any relationship we have. Make me the wife you want me to be. Make me the worker you want me to be. Make me the, not the one I think I should be. And I think, like one of the prayers I have whenever I speak is God, please remove from my head and my heart the things I think I should say and replace them with the words you would have me speak. So it kind of goes along the same lines. And I love that about step 6, am I ready for God? And then the other one was react and respond. And lately I found that, I react and I'm definitely out of fear. There's been a lot of fear in my life lately since my husband passed, and, there's been some things happening, but there's also been a lot of really big God shots, coming at me that are telling me that everything's going to be okay and that I'm going to be okay, and the trust in God to believe those things, to believe that when I think that, that I'm not just, it's not just, oh, it's going to be okay, but I actually, have those thoughts, and I can hear my husband's voice saying, it always works out, Sarah, it always does. And it will this time, and it will every time. So, that, but what I've found is that when I start to react, that knee buckling reaction, that knee buckling fear, I just got to let my knees go a little further and hit the ground. And that's when the faith kicks in and I respond. Thank you so much, both of you, Rick and Mary. Thank you so much for tonight. That was phenomenal. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Charles?
Hello, everybody. Charlie, alcoholic, and I just love to listen to you again, Mary and Rick. I haven't been on here in a while. Work kind of took me away, and I really miss being here because I called Gary up after the first time I came on here, emotional sobriety, and I go, Gary, man, I'm all shook up. I said, man, I said, this emotional thing. He goes, I said, I'm really emotional. He goes, oh, hell, Charlie, you've always been emotional, you know? And it's because of, you know, the spirit that's drawn into here, and to listen to it, I just heard so much. But one of the things that really touches my heart the most is I'm sitting here at my little desk in my room, and I got my big book over here. I got my Bible here, and I got recovery Bible that that puts them together. Because you know, the old timers, when I came in Maine, that's what they gave me. They gave me a big book and a Bible, and they said, just study these, just study these. But this thing about the suffering, and you know, my experience, and when I get down and understand the suffering, for me, is being separated from the sunlight of the Spirit. And when I start doing inventory on what that separation is, drives me to become, you know, more like the Master. And what, you know, he is trying to teach me to do, how to, you know, spent 3 decades, you know, getting rid of the garbage. You know, we spent, usually, you know, for some of us, you know, we do it in a few years, but I dealt with a lot of mental damage. And God told me one time that I did that so you don't become so arrogant, you know, and I believe that. And he goes, your job is to read these books. And he goes, my job is to bring it out when I need it to be brought out. And there was so much comfort in knowing that, you know, that's what I do. I mean, all the books, you know, people say, oh, you know, listen to this guy, you know, I'll listen to him, or here's this book, read this book. I'm not a really good reader, so I'll get the audio and I'll listen to it. With a lot of good stuff, but, you know, I realized that only when that becomes God's experience through me that it means anything. And so after 30 years, I've gone back to the 2 books that got me sober. And it's amazing because, you know, I know all the fear and all the pain that I've dealt with over the years vanishes when I'm in the presence. And been in the, you know, the big book and the word and knowing this stuff, you know, I realized, you know, and I remember an old timer told me, you know, may the messenger never be greater than the message. And so I didn't have to open my heart and let God in. I had to open my heart and let God out. It was on page 55. It says, you know, deep down inside every man, woman, child is the fundamental idea of God. So if I can just meditate and try to let him out, you know, stop me from stopping God. You know, that's my thing today, you know. I gotta stop me from stopping God. Because he's in the outcome business. I'm in the business of usually screwing it up. But anyway, it was wonderful seeing everybody, and Mary and Rick, good listening to you guys, man. Awesome stuff. So God bless.
Thanks, Charlie. And the last one will be Rick.
I'm Rick Seed. I'm an alcoholic. So thank you, Mary and Rick. Rick's going to be doing a workshop for us, or a Founders Day talk for us in June in Lafayette, Louisiana. And we were trying to think of something to add to that talk, and he came up with the topic of emotional sobriety and trying to tie that to the traditions. And we've had a couple of talks around it. And tonight he sent me a link to this meeting. This is my first time in y'all's meeting. This was a super meeting. I am really glad that I got the opportunity to stop in and hear a little bit of Rick. I heard Mary in our 5:30 Thursday meditation meeting here a couple of months ago. She's a big part of my life through Gwen B here, my spiritual advisor. So what I wanted to say was, Mary started out with, if we can just simply accept the things we cannot change, our life is different. Our life is of an emotional sobriety that we can live with. And how do we get to that? Because I've been, my favorite paragraph in all of our literature comes out of 12 and 12 in step 6. And it simply states, having been granted a perfect release from alcoholism, why then shouldn't we be able to achieve by the same means a perfect release from every other difficulty or defect? And it goes on to talk about why that can't happen. And Bill is just really puts it beautifully together, that you know, the things of how I treat relationships and how I treat everything about me, everything that happens to me when I start breathing, I think I can handle. It's not quite as difficult. And this piece about the refinement, you know, that's so I'm not going to read this too, but if you get a chance later, in the daily reflections, February 2nd, it gives a perfect definition of why we can't do that with the rest of the things in our lives. It talks about, I'm going to read the first sentence out of it. Characteristic of the so-called typical alcoholic is a narcissistic, egocentric core dominated by feelings and omnipotence, intent on maintaining at all cost its inner integrity. You know, that's me. I believe that I can handle everything in life. And you know, I don't need God. I don't want God. I don't know what God is when I get here. And I believe now that I've heard it, Mary talking about that refinement, I've known for a long time that the grace that God gave me to stop drinking when I tried for years and years and years. I woke up on so many stainless steel park benches and drunk tanks that, you know, it baffled me for most of my young life. And I just couldn't get there. And I know that that's a gift. That's the gift of grace that God presents to the drunks before we even get to the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I believe now that it's because when my life's poured into that crucible and it enters that furnace, God's waiting there for that shining glow, for all of the impurities of my life to just bubble out. And he says, you're ready. And he gives me that gift. He gives me that gift of sobriety, that ability to be safe and protected, to not be able to pick up that bottle of whiskey one more time. But he challenges me with doing that with the rest of the things in my life. So I'm grateful, very grateful that and thank you, Rick, for sending me the link. I'll be back, and I'm going to share this with as many people as I can, particularly those guys that I have some influence in their sponsorship life. And we're going to see where it goes. I love all you guys, and I'm glad to be here, and I'll be back. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Rick. All right, so it's time to close. And basically the way we do this is we say a prayer of our choice to ourselves while we stay muted. And then when you're done, just come back and we'll thank our wonderful speakers. Thank you again. Thanks again so much, Rick and Mary. That was just out of this world. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Great meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick
Thank
and
you, Rick and
Mary.
Mary.
Thanks,
Thank you, Rick.
Mary.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Rick.
Mary.
You
Thanks,
all.
Rick and Mary.
Thanks, Sarah.
Good meeting.
Love you guys.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
You guys.
Sarah, thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Rick and Mary. Thank you. It was beautiful.
It was
Thank
a
you,
pleasure.
Rick. Thank you, Mary.
Thank
Good
you.
meeting.
Mary, thank you,
Thank-
Rick, thank you, Sarah, good to
Thank you,
see you
Sarah.
guys.
Hi, Sam.
Yes,
Thank
much
you.
love, everybody.
Looking forward to next week.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Ferris. And
blessed week.
I'll try to send you a request. Maybe we can talk again later this week or early next week. Thank you. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick and Mary. Sorry to hear about your
Thanks, Jim.
TIA.
Yeah, I know, but I seem to be still clicking, so
Yeah, that's
we'll
good.
see.
I've been there, but I was drunk, so.
Yeah. Rick,
Sweet dreams.
good job, Rick.
Thank you, Mary. You kept
Beautiful
it between the
Nice talk.
ditches.
Good for you.
both of you.
That was a nice format. I like it.